There's a sacred silence beneath all the noise in your mind. It's always there, waiting. And the more chaotic your outer world becomes, the more essential it is to find this stillness within. Carl Jung believed that we are not what we appear to be on the surface. The person you identify as the one with goals, habits, fears, and a social role, that's your ego. But the ego is just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lies something far deeper. Jung called this greater depth the self. And the self is vast. It's the totality of who you are, not just a version of you that plays nice in public, but the raw, unfiltered whole. Your darkness, your dreams, your longings, your untapped wisdom. But here's the catch. Most people are terrified of that deeper part of themselves. They run from it. Why? Because it threatens the little kingdom the ego has built. The ego wants control, certainty, validation. But the self doesn't play by those rules. The self demands truth. It demands surrender. So, what happens when life forces you to let go of people, of plans, of your carefully constructed identity? You suffer, but in that suffering, a door opens. A crack appears in the ego's armor. And for a moment, just a moment, stillness enters. That stillness isn't empty. It's not numb or passive. It's alive. It's the presence of the self making itself known to you. But here's the hard part. You can't access it through effort. You can't will yourself into stillness by force. You have to surrender. Jung said, what you resist persists. The more you fight your inner chaos, the more power it gains. But when you stop fighting, when you allow the noise, the pain, the fear to be there without resistance, something shifts. You stop identifying with your thoughts. You stop clinging to your false self. And in that moment, the self steps forward. This is where real healing begins. Not in controlling your life, but in learning to listen. Not in becoming more of what the world expects you to be, but in becoming more of who you truly are. The ego screams. The self whispers. The ego wants answers. The self teaches to experience. And often, its teachings come disguised as loss, failure, loneliness. But underneath those painful lessons is a silent invitation. Come home to yourself. This is the essence of Jung's psychology. To make the unconscious conscious. To integrate the shadow. To align the ego with the self, not by force, but by awareness. And this awareness grows in stillness, in quiet walks, in journaling, in letting go of needing to be someone and simply being. So if you're tired, if your soul feels heavy, if nothing on the outside seems to satisfy you anymore, that's not failure. That's your deeper self calling you inward. Don't ignore that call. Sit with it. Let the silence speak. Let it unravel everything that is false. And in its place, you'll begin to feel something ancient and true rising within you. Not the ego, not the image, but the self. And when that happens, you'll no longer need to chase meaning, because you'll be it. Real synchronicity doesn't come when we're constantly trying to control, chase, or figure things out. It comes when we've stopped running. When we stop fighting the silence, when we finally sit still long enough for the deeper layers of life to start revealing themselves. You see, the reason most people never experience real synchronicity is because they're too busy chasing signs instead of becoming someone who can actually receive them. We've been conditioned to believe that the more we do, the more progress we make. But Jung knew the truth. The soul doesn't move on command. It doesn't obey logic or productivity. It doesn't speak in straight lines. The soul speaks in symbols, in dreams, in sudden insights, in recurring patterns, in strange encounters that don't make sense until weeks, months, or even years later. But here's the key. You can't force these things to happen. You can't act synchronicity. You can't manifest it through forced positivity or daily affirmations. Synchronicity begins to show up only when we begin to surrender. When we stop trying to micromanage the timeline of our life. When we stop demanding constant answers. And surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting that even in the stillness, something profound is happening, something that the rational mind can't see yet. You might be sitting in a quiet room, thinking nothing is changing, but in the background, deep in your unconscious, a realignment is taking place. Old stories are dissolving. Ego defenses are softening. Space is being made for a new reality. And once that space is open, once you stop trying to force a breakthrough, the universe begins to respond. Not with fireworks, but with whispers, with synchronicities, with patterns that guide you in ways logic never could. That's why Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Synchronicity is what happens when that veil begins to lift. When the unconscious starts making itself known through the outer world. You begin to meet people at the exact moment you're ready for them. Books fall off shelves that contain the very insight you needed. Dreams return with messages you ignored for years. But none of that happens when you're obsessively trying to figure it out. It only happens when you stop, when you allow. When you open, stillness is not empty. It's a sacred space where life begins to communicate again. But you have to be quiet enough to hear it. And yes, this means letting go of control, of needing to know when, of needing to know how, of needing to feel like you're always making progress. You knew that transformation isn't loud, it's slow, it's subtle. It happens underground, where the ego can't interrupt. And if you resist the stillness, if you keep chasing, you delay the very thing you're longing for. But if you stop, if you surrender just long enough, you'll start to notice the threads, the synchronicities, the invisible hands guiding you from within. And in that moment, you'll realize the breakthrough didn't come from more effort. It came from doing nothing, because doing nothing isn't really nothing. It's sacred. It's healing. It's the silence in which the self begins to speak.